Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today. It's been a while since we had one of these press conferences. As you know, we were having them daily for a while and then weekly for a while, primarily because of COVID. I'm very happy to say that we no longer need those daily or weekly press conferences because we're doing so much better with respect to our COVID numbers. Hospitalizations are at the lowest point that they've been since the start of the pandemic. And of course, you know that all of the restrictions and mitigations, when those were in place, it was in an effort to preserve hospital capacity. So this is the best news that we could have with respect to COVID. We still don't have a single day of reporting since the beginning of the pandemic with 0 deaths. Really looking forward to that day, and I'm hoping and praying that comes very soon. Obviously, the data is encouraging, but we also know that our testing is down, and much of the testing that's being done is being done with antigen tests at home, and so those aren't being reported into the system. But the ground truth numbers are the hospitalization numbers, and that's where we're focusing, and things are much, much better. Obviously, COVID is not gone. You still see people, know people, read about people who are catching COVID and so forth, but we're doing much better. I do encourage people, if they've not yet been vaccinated, to do that and to understand that the 4th shot is available to individuals who are 50 or older, the second booster, and also available to anyone who is immunocompromised. I do want to just acknowledge we're about halfway through this regular session of the legislature. I thought it would be a good time to come in and visit with you all and talk some about the session. This is generally when we start to see bills moving through the process. I think you're seeing the money bills on the House floor today that will be moved over to the Senate. So I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about the budget and some legislative priorities, and then we'll take some questions as well. So as you all know from previous discussions that I've had, that it is my belief that we submitted a very good budget for the state of Louisiana, one that was responsible in every way, especially in the sense that it only spent recurring expenditures for recurring obligations, and then the one-time money was all lined up against one-time expenditures, most notably those in infrastructure and so forth. And the investments that we're making in education in particular are just really significant, and I think that they reflect what has been a priority for the state of Louisiana for a long time, but to an even greater degree, we're focusing on early childhood education, K through 12, and higher ed all at the same time, and I'm very proud of that. The money instruments, especially House Bill 1 that you're seeing come off the House floor, reflects the vast majority of what I asked the legislature to do, and that's a good thing. Obviously, there will be additional changes in the Senate, and we'll keep working throughout the process. One thing that I'm gratified to see is the $1,500 pay raise that I've asked for our K through 12 teachers is there, and you know there's a $750 raise there for support workers as well. I am asking that the amount be increased. That will be possible after the REC meets. I think that meeting is scheduled for May 9th. There will be additional revenue in the forecast for next year, which would easily accommodate an increase to $2,000 per teacher. And I continue to say that that really is the minimum of what we should do in Louisiana for next year. And I am optimistic that those changes will be made to the appropriations bill once it gets to the Senate and that REC meeting is held. There are other ways that funding could be incorporated into the teacher pay raise. And one of those, quite frankly, we have some savings next year because the MFP is funded through a formula multiplied by student count. And so there's about $25 million in savings next year that actually gets you halfway to that incremental raise to get from 1,500 to 2,000. And so that could be done, and then the REC would only have to the increased REC forecast would only need another $25 million to get to the 2,000. So there are multiple ways to do it. We feel very confident the legislature is going to do that. And even though there's a long way to go, and I fully expect that many more of our priorities will be reflected in the final versions of the bill once it comes to my desk, I will have to tell you that it's inexplicable from my perspective and disappointing that the House of Representatives would remove funding to increase supplemental pay for law enforcement officers who are post-certified and for firefighters, especially coming off after 2 years of a pandemic when we all recognized the heroic work being done by our first responders. And especially early on in the pandemic when they were doing this at great risk to themselves. So I'm not sure what that's about. It certainly isn't a lack of funding. I have a hard time believing that the House of Representatives doesn't support law enforcement officers and firefighters. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, but I'll be looking for the opportunity to work with the Senate to restore that funding so that it reflects. You know, I kind of thought in Louisiana we were not in any way involved in any sort of a defund the police or anything like that. So I can't imagine that that's it either. So we'll keep working on that and get that money restored. I feel very confident about that. Also disappointed at present about funding for the Mississippi River Bridge. Look, this is the best budget maybe ever for infrastructure in Louisiana, and that's for a lot of reasons. The $1.4 billion in American Rescue Plan funding that we had left over from last year that's available to us. We have surplus from last year as well. We have excess in the current year, and then we have the Infrastructure Investment Job Act that is already presenting opportunities for us. And now is the time to marshal these resources for the single most important priority transportation project in the state, and that is a new bridge here in the Baton Rouge area, south of what we call the New Bridge, that would connect with I-10 on both the east and west sides. And that is about a $2.5 billion project. The funding that we're asking to put aside for that particular lineup for the bridge represents about 20%. And that will let the federal government know that we're serious and allow us to be more competitive in discretionary grant opportunities going forward. It would let the private sector know that we are serious and that we're committed to this project, and it would open some doors there as well. And quite frankly, it's not materially different than what we've done for other expensive capacity transportation projects, where we have put money away years in advance of construction so that we could advance the project at the soonest possible time. And everyone needs to know that there will be no final decision from the federal government about advancing this project because it's more than $500 million, and their rules require you to have a financing plan in place. And so you're not going to get a final decision from the federal government if you don't have a credible financing plan, which you can't have if you don't have funding. But this is materially no different than what we've done in the past. Is it more money? Yes. But that reflects two things. It's a more expensive project, and it's the highest priority project that we have. So we're going to keep working with the legislature on that as well, because there's no doubt in my mind this is the most important thing that we can do, and the right amount of funding for this effort at this time is the $500 million that we have asked the legislature to put away for this particular project. You know, yesterday that we had an opportunity to advance passenger rail in Louisiana, in the sense that we were successful in getting an inspection train to run from Baton Rouge to New Orleans. We actually had the administrator of the Federal Railroad Administration here. We had the president of Amtrak. We had the CEO of Canadian Pacific and the CEO of the Kansas City Railroad. And so all of the principal players were there with Dr. Sean Wilson, the Secretary of Transportation, and myself. We know that passenger rail between Baton Rouge and New Orleans would be very important for us for many, many reasons. But yeah, I'm excited about the opportunity that will give us to better function as a region so that Baton Rouge and New Orleans together can compete against other super regions around the country and not be competing with one another. So that you can live in one metropolitan area and work in another, or recreate in the other, or go to the airport, access medical appointments, those sorts of things. It also helps us with our climate action plan because you get vehicles off the road. And then it'll also help with the congestion that we're seeing on Interstate 10 in particular. And to the degree that we can have that service up and running while the work is going on to widen on Interstate 10 between the bridge and the split, especially once lane closures and realignments start to happen. That will be critically important as well. So making sure we advance it as soon as possible is important for the state for all of these reasons, and that's why we had $25 million in our proposal. It's my understanding at current, and by the way, things are happening downstairs as we speak, so if there's been an amendment and so forth, I apologize, but I think there's about $12.5 million for passenger rail between Baton Rouge and New Orleans in House Bill 2 at present. And you know, obviously thankful that it's there, but it's just not enough in order to do what we have to do. And the other thing is we don't just have capital expenditure costs associated with this project, we're going to have some operational costs. And so those operational costs cannot be in House Bill 2. That just doesn't work. So we'll keep working with the Senate on that and make sure that we can move forward. And look, I'm overall very pleased with the progress that we're making on a number of fronts, including bills in the legislative package, some of which have advanced unanimously, such as House Bill 160 by Representative Mandy Landry, which is related to post-disaster tenant protection, Senate Bill 182 by Senator Fields, which is related to post-certification of law enforcement officers, and Senate Bill 192 by Senator Gerald Boudreaux related to post-secondary inclusive education fund. Also equally excited about other bills that I believe have bipartisan support, especially those related to insurance reform. You know, we've had 5 hurricanes across Louisiana in the last 2 years. And we have homeowners and business owners all the way from the southwest Louisiana to and where it abuts Texas, all the way to southeast Louisiana, where it abuts Mississippi, who have had to file claims with their insurance carriers. And the only thing we're asking is that these homeowners and business owners get the benefit of the premium dollars paid, and that the insurance companies do what they contractually obligated themselves to do in exchange for those premium dollars. We're not asking for anything more than that, and so hopefully those instruments will pass, and that there will be more certainty going forward. Insurance is supposed to give you peace of mind, and it's also supposed to help you to recover. It does neither if the insurance companies don't do what they're obligated to do in the insurance contracts. Also working to address the staggering pay gap that women experience in Louisiana to their detriment, not just women, but families and especially children. Today, Senator Barrow's 269, Senate Bill 269, was heard in Senate Labor, and it actually dealt with a state minimum wage of $10.25. That would be a modest but meaningful increase, and it was deferred, but we are not deterred. The people of Louisiana, in large numbers and by a large percentage, just like states elsewhere across the country, believe we ought to have a higher minimum wage in place. The current minimum wage is the federal minimum wage of $7.25. It's been in place since 2009. 2 bills that would address pay inequality will be heard next week. Senator Jackson's pay transparency and pay secrecy bill will be in Senate Labor, and Representative Kyle Green's equal pay for women bill, House Bill 219, will be in House Labor. And obviously, we continue to support these instruments. It is beyond offensive that Louisiana has the highest gap in pay between men and women when they have similar qualifications and doing similar jobs. And no matter how you cut it, this gap is measured the same way in all the states, and we have the biggest gap. And that is not good for our state. It's not good for our families. It's not good for our children. In House Labor, Representative Green will also have a constitutional amendment working to establish a minimum wage of $11.25. Modest but meaningful, but giving the people of Louisiana an opportunity to vote on it. And do I think the minimum wage should be in the Constitution? No. But I believe it needs to be better than and higher than $7.25. And if it takes allowing the people of Louisiana to vote on it, then I'm certainly willing to support that, and therefore I support Representative Green's efforts. So overall, very pleased with the way the session is going. A lot of work left to do, and so forth. There will be the additional REC meeting that we mentioned, and then the bills will take their final shape. And we'll keep working every day with both the House and the Senate, and Republicans and Democrats, but with respect to the money bills, the effort will shift over to the Senate here very shortly. So with that, I'm going to take a few questions. Yes, ma'am.
The $500 million for the Mississippi River Bridge has already been split up into two different funds, even though we haven't, the lawmakers haven't decided exactly what they're using it yet for. It seems like they're already kind of picking it apart. Are you concerned that they're not ready to get on board with your plan for that money?
Well, as I mentioned, I am concerned. I'm disappointed by that, because if you ask the vast majority of people in the state and in the legislature what is the highest priority transportation infrastructure project in the state, it is a new bridge here across the Mississippi River that would allow traffic on I-10 to bypass the current bridge. And that's because of congestion that is detrimental to the movement of commerce, not just in Louisiana, but that commercial traffic goes all the way from California to Florida, but certainly it's having a bigger impact on us locally. But it's also about safety. It's also about quality of life and all of those things. So I think there's a general recognition of that, but yet it's not matched by the priorities that are being set in terms of where they're putting the money. I do think that there'll be an opportunity to fix that in the Senate, but it's got to be fixed in a way that actually allows the money to be safeguarded and preserved and available only for the bridge. Otherwise, it really doesn't help you with the things that I was mentioning earlier, and that is to be able to use the money to convince the federal government that we are serious and we're putting up our own funds so that we then can be more competitive for the discretionary grant opportunities that are part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It won't be successful if it's not in that type of a fund that I just mentioned in terms of getting the private sector to buy in either. I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to work this out with the Senate. We should be able to. Again, it is not materially different than what we've done for other projects, whether it's I-49, Highway 1, the Calcasieu Bridge, where we were putting money away years before construction was going to start, because you have to have the funding in place in order to be able to go to construction once that becomes possible. And I will say again, anytime you are looking for federal approval of a project that is $500 million or more, you're not going to get the approval until you show them that you have a viable financing plan. And so the absence of a fund with considerable money in it for a project that's going to cost about $2.5 billion will be a serious impediment to the timely delivery of the project. And when you talk about timely delivery of this project would have been about 10 years ago. We don't want to stretch it out any further than is absolutely necessary. Yes, sir.
House says, let's take the 500 and make it 400, put the 400 in a fund and have conversations. You served in the House. Do you think that there's a mindset where legislators would prefer to spread money north to south, east to west, as opposed to a single project? Or are you confident that when it's all said and done, you're going to come away with a substantial investment in the bridge?
Yeah, well, what I can tell you is the mindset of those legislators who support doing what's happening in the House is obviously different than my mindset. And the unfortunate part about this is we have record amounts of funding to invest in infrastructure. And so the money that I've asked to be put towards the bridge here in Baton Rouge, it's not like it's being taken from other places around the state and depriving them of moving their infrastructure needs forward too, whether those are capacity projects or maintenance and preservation projects. And that's why this is a little bit hard to understand, quite frankly. But again, I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to work through this with the Senate. That's what happens often. And so we're just going to see, but we'll be working very hard to advance. And by the way, there are other very important projects that we're trying to advance. Capacity projects like I-49 South, like the Calcasieu River Bridge in Lake Charles on I-10 and so forth. And then we clearly have maintenance and preservation issues as well around the state. One of the things that we consistently hear from folks around Louisiana is that they believe that our infrastructure is lacking, and they are right. We have an opportunity to really address the most pressing needs, and we need to make sure that we don't squander this opportunity. But it's sort of like that old saying, you got to make hay while the sun's shining. The sun is shining now. And if we don't put this money away now and dedicate it to this particular project, then we will be delaying. And to a date, I can't even tell you when we might be able to deliver a new bridge in Baton Rouge. Yes?
Senate Bill 44, which is the anti-transgender sports ban. I know you vetoed it last year. Would you do the same if it passes again?
Yeah, well, I don't think you all have ever heard me announce from this podium before a bill gets to my desk that I'm going to veto it, because I always think that there's an opportunity and a path forward to working things out so that may not be necessary. But I will tell you that my views haven't changed. We're a year further down the road, and in the intervening year, there's not been a single instance of this happening in Louisiana, just like there hasn't been at any point prior to that. This is a non-issue. This is not what families sit around the supper table talking about the challenges right now, whether it's inflation or infrastructure or education, you name it. And so my views on the bill certainly haven't changed, but I just don't do what you invited me to do as a matter of practice. Yes.
House floor today that some of the members are concerned about the looming predicted fiscal cliff in 2025 when our economy levels out after recovering, as well as the half-cent sales tax rolling off. Some believe that we're not doing enough now to deal with that looming cliff. Do you believe that as well, or do you feel that we're in a good place?
No, well, first of all, I don't believe that. I think we have proposed, for example, as I led off this press conference, a very reasonable, responsible budget in light of what our critical needs are, what our priorities are and have been for a long time. And, if you're not going to invest more in early childhood when you have an REC forecast that supports it, when are you going to do it? If you're not going to raise teacher pay substantially in the same circumstances, when are you going to do it? If you're not going to advance the most critical infrastructure projects when you have the opportunity to do it, when will you? And so, no, I believe that this is a responsible budget. And look, you're looking at someone who came into office having the biggest fiscal cliff in our history. We were $2 billion short for the first full fiscal year once I became governor. We have stabilized things. We have turned things around. Our economy is growing, and I know there are challenges out there for sure around inflation, and you have global supply and demand challenges. You have supply chain issues, all of which are exacerbated now by a war in Ukraine and so forth. And the principal thing that's really causing anxiety and worry is inflation. I get that. But when you ask people what they're really concerned about, it's education, it's infrastructure, and it's the economy. And there's a little bit of a disconnect. I don't know if you were paying attention, but last week we announced the lowest unemployment rate in Louisiana in 14 years. I don't know that you all covered that so well, but those are the facts. We're getting very close to having 2 million people employed again in Louisiana. So there's a disconnect between what people are feeling, and look, I get it, especially when you see the price of gas, because I think that kind of becomes a proxy for inflation in general. But at the end of the day, we continue to grow the economy, to attract economic development projects, to advance a clean energy future, and to propose budgets that are responsible and reasonable in light of what's actually happening here. And I think we're doing that. Yes. Well, just a minute.
State lawmakers have filed several bills that would create education savings account programs that would essentially allow students to take their share of state education dollars with them when they leave to private school tuition, other things. Superintendent Brumley has spoken highly of the program, as well as other top state education officials. Do you support that approach?
Yeah, I don't support things that would move money away from public education like that. And by the way, I don't believe that the mechanisms that would be created by those bills are actually education savings accounts. I mean, we already have those. These are other vehicles, and so it's not something that I support. Yes.
This is for a colleague. Governor, do you have any concerns that the legislature is going to approve too many licenses for medical marijuana for pharmacies?
Yeah. I'm not going to say I have concerns that too many pharmacies will be licensed. What I will tell you is we have a framework that we just created a couple of years ago. And I think it's too soon to move away from that framework. One of the things that businesses of all types want is predictability, certainty, and so forth. And if you change the rules too often, and especially if you create a framework and you ask people to participate in that and make the requisite investments, and only to get a couple of years down the road, and then you change that framework so that nobody would have made that investment early on had they known you were going to come behind them and make the change, I think that could be very problematic. So I would hope that they keep the number of licenses to 10, maybe one or two more if there's some real need for that. And then whether you have satellite locations operating with those licenses, I think that's a reasonable discussion to have too. But I believe that those pharmacies that have been awarded licenses ought to be able to realize a return on the investments that they've already been made before we ever give an idea about greatly increasing the number of pharmacies that would receive a license. Okay, one more. This will be it. Yeah.
Do you think if they don't, back to the bridge, do you think if they don't pass the funding for that this year, this could be the end all? Or
yeah. No, I'm not going to say it's going to be the end all, but it's hard for me to believe that there will ever be a better opportunity to put away 20% of the estimated cost of this project. This is the year where we happen to have surplus from last year, record excess from this year. We have American Rescue Plan dollars that are available, and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is only in place for 5 years. This is year one. You put the money away now because you have it, and then you compete for additional IIJA funds over the next 4 years. The longer you wait, the more opportunities you lose. And I promise you that this is the best opportunity that we're going to have to make substantial headway on what is the most important transportation infrastructure project in our state. I'm disappointed in what has happened. I don't believe that what has happened represents where we're going to be at the end of the day. I don't believe that, because I just think that there are too many common sense reasons, compelling reasons why this needs to be done and why it needs to be done now. And if we don't do it now, it is hard to see that we'll be here next year with an opportunity to do it, because the people who are down there making the decisions in the House, it isn't like they're putting away another $500 million that they might be able to come back to next year. And that it just needs to be done now. And we're going to keep working to make that happen. Tomorrow is Earth Day. I will be spending the morning doing something that I hope all of you will engage in, not just tomorrow, but going forward, and that is I'll be picking up some trash around Capitol Lake and in here around the Capitol. You've heard me say it before, but for some reason, because of COVID, but also I think because of the disasters and so forth, litter problems around our state are the worst I've ever seen. And we have a new campaign. We have a new task force. We are going to come up with some new strategies, some funding to implement those strategies and so forth. But I'm asking people, don't wait till that task force reports. We know that we can do a better job today of picking up litter. It's just such a drag on our economy, on our quality of life, on our natural resources. And so I'm asking people to do that. We will let you know when the next press conference will be. But I would think that we're going to have more weekly press conferences for the remainder of the legislative session than we've had up to now, just because more bills will be coming through and there'll be more definition taking shape around things such as the money bills. But thank you all again for being here, and we'll let you know when that next press conference is.